63 fragments are not a complete Quran. And anyone really with a logical way of processing things should know that, should know better. Hello everyone, welcome back to a continuation of this discussion about the early Islamic history and in particular the Quran, early Qurans. We titled today's episode, why basically 63 fragments do not comprise a full Quran. 63 fragments are not a complete Quran. And anyone really with a logical way of processing things should know that, should know better not to take any fragments. I don't care if it was 163 or 1063 fragments. They are fragments. They do not make a whole. And with me here, of course, to process all of this is Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, what are we talking about, first of all, about the 63 fragments?
If you want to back up and give some historical precedent. We were down at Speaker's Corner, Hatu and I, to introduce Dan Brubaker's book in 2019. The day it came out, or May, I think it was May 22nd, we wanted to introduce the book. I got up on the ladder. Whenever I go down to Speaker's Corner, the Muslims make a beeline for me. And there was Mansour Ahmad, I saw Ali Dawa there, I saw Muhammad Hijab. They were all there in the Muslim crowd, but they weren't coming over to my ladder because they didn't know what to do with this material. And you could see they finally pushed, I think it was Mansour Ahmad. I don't know if he was pushed, but he finally did have to come over to our ladder, stuck his ladder next to me to try to confront me with these. And as he was confronting with me with these manuscript variants, he made a claim. He made the claim, and it's all on film.
Our Quran that we read today has a continuous textual tradition in our manuscript traditions. So now what we establish is this. The Quran, when we examine the manuscript traditions, by those isolated errors, scribal errors, we have a robust tradition, orally and by written form, that the Quran we read today is the Quran that has been transmitted by our generations of Muslims from day one, from the Prophet ﷺ.
Okay, Mansour, real quickly, very quickly, before you leave, how far does that tradition go back to?
That is why.
How far does that tradition go back to?
Absolute certainty of our textual and oral transmission of the Quran. Because not
did you see? He's saying textual and oral.
It is also
do you have a textual condition that goes back to 652?
Look,
do you have a textual tradition that goes back to 652?
Listen.
Yes or no?
Any textual...
Does you have a textual all the way back to Uthman?
Listen, any text of the Quran that you examine, any text. So when we examine the Quran in the manuscript traditions, we have almost 250,000 manuscripts of the Quran across the world in libraries.
You're not answering the question. Do they go back to Uthman? Do they go back to 652?
You are interrupting when I'm speaking.
Well, answer the question.
Right. So, we have, from our textual tradition alone, more than 99% of the Quranic text from the first Islamic century.
Okay, explain when the first Islamic century goes to. It goes from 662 to 22 up to 721. So we're talking about the 8th century, am I correct?
If you go to IslamicAwareness.org, in which we have tabulated and shown Quranic manuscripts all around the world with references, which ones are Campbell dated, which ones are polygraphically dated, you will see the amount of first century within Islam, first century Islam, the Quranic manuscripts that we have, you have 0%.
None of them are saved with the current.
Okay, here we go. Have you heard the claim he has made? Mansour, do you have 114 surahs of the Quran in one manuscript that is from the mid-7th century? Yes or no?
No.
Do you have a complete Quran from the time of Uthman, 114 surahs in our hands today that we can look at?
What? Hang on.
Do you want an answer? Or do you want him to waffle on? No, you don't.
We have, at the moment, you must be a Christian, right?
Answer the question.
Do you want an answer to this? Okay, let's continue on. His answer is no, they do not have that. Do you have a complete Quran from the 7th century at all? Do you have a complete Quran that's 114 surahs from the same century that Muhammad lived? Yes or no?
As I said, from the 1st century of Islam.
The 1st century goes up to 721. That's the 8th century. So your answer is 8th century.
Are you gonna let me
Do you have a complete Quran by the 721?
listen?
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
The guy
Silence.
who is demanding a complete Quran from...
Not answering the question is yes or no.
Listen, let me respond to you in kind, right? If you examine the manuscript traditions of Jewish scripture...
We're not talking about Jewish scripture now. We're not talking about Jewish scripture. We're talking about Quranic scripture because we don't make this claim. Only the Muslims make this claim. It is the Muslim that just now said that we can go back to the 1st century of Islam, that's AH, which goes from 622 to 721, and that we can find a complete manuscript. Tell me where. Give me the name.
Did I not say? Of course, you did not listen to what I'm saying. That's why you need to...
Oh, you're going to change it now. So you don't have a manuscript.
Did I...
Do you have a complete manuscript in the 1st century of Islam?
Stop chicken.
Did I not say
Oh,
to you
come on.
that
Cover.
we have more than 97
Oh, it's not complete.
of the text of the Quran
It's
from
not
the 1st
complete.
century?
Which is not
Okay,
exactly
that's
the
all
same
I
what
need to
we
hear.
have.
Now, did you notice? He cannot claim a complete manuscript. He cannot claim because there is no complete manuscript. He wants to take it back to the 1st century AH. What he's not telling you is that almost every one of these manuscripts are from the 8th and 9th century. What we're looking at today are the earliest manuscripts. There is nothing earlier than the Pentapolandis. There is nothing earlier than the Topkapi. There is nothing earlier than the Sana manuscript. When you look at those manuscripts, how many variants do we have? Go ahead, Mansoor. Give us the number that Dan has found. We've been asking now for 1/2 hour.
Listen, Mr. Smith, we don't have to worry about these manuscript variants because we can trace all the way back to Muhammad, the Quran. Verse by verse, every verse we can trace right back to Muhammad. I quickly stopped what I was saying, turned to him and said, you can? Can you tell me what manuscript you're talking about? Can you tell me what Quran you're referring to? What Quran can be traced back to Muhammad? And he stopped and said, okay, Uthman. He didn't mean Muhammad, he meant Uthman, 652. I said, okay, fine. Can you show me where this manuscript is from the time of Uthman? Even one? And then he's paused. He said, well, okay. He was, you could see he didn't know what to say. So I said, okay, let me help you out. How about the 7th century? Can you show me one from the 7th century? That's 699. He says, you're not listening to me. What I did say is in the 1st century of Islam. Well, he just introduced that into the discussion. 1st century of Islam, that's 719. 622 to 719. So that's 8th century. All right, fine. Can you show me a complete Quran by 719? So 3 different steps, I kept backing him up. Got to 719, and he said, I can show you 96. He said about 97% of the Quran. 97% of the Quran? I said, where is it? He said, we have now the 97% of the Quran by 719. What was he talking about? Let's go to the slides and see what he's talking about. See, Mansour Ahmad is in charge, or is one of those responsible for all the manuscript that they have in Islamic Awareness, which is the largest Muslim website that has a repository of all the manuscripts. It's the best one in the world. It's from Cambridge University, and he is the one that is one, not responsible, but one of those responsible for these manuscripts. So he's referring to this graph right here. This is the graph that you'll see there on their website, and it's 63 fragments that he's talking about. This is the 96%. It's not 97%. It's 96% of the Quran that they have been able to find by 719. So within the first century of Islam, from 622 to 719, they have found these 63 fragments. Take a look at them. That one up there is the 2165. That is the Ma'il manuscript. It's the biggest of all the fragments.
British Library one.
British Library one. We saw it in a previous episode. It is about 50% of the Quran. So that's the best they've got. And then you start getting on. The one that you're looking at, you can see some of the Dam 129. That is your Sana'a manuscript.
That's right, yeah.
And there's 1, 2, 3 of them that are up here. Look at those. Those are all they're saying before 719. So I wanted to find out if these were correct, because if you look down, you come all the way down to here, and you see at the very bottom, these are just about half a verses, or even 1 verse or 2 verses. These are small little fragments. Most of them are fragments. But I wanted to see if this is correct. I'd like to know it. I said, that's fascinating. So I sent my team to go and look at it. Dr. Pat Andrews was the one that did the major part of research on this. And he went through every one of these 63 manuscripts. What we was assuming these were full manuscripts. No, these were just 1 verse here, a little verse there, maybe 3 verses here, maybe half a sentence here, all the way up to the Ma'il, which is the best they've got. This is what he found. When you look at that, 20 of these, see the ones I'm putting up there now, the ones in green arrows? 20 of these are what we would know as tentatively. In other words, we're not really sure. And these are the ones at least the scholars have looked at, and they are tentative. They don't really know for sure if they are before 719 or after, so they're tentative. So they really shouldn't have been using these. And then 9 of them, look at the ones, the blue arrows going up right now, including the Ma'il one, the biggest one, the tallest one at the top. It is after 719. These are all after. They should never even use those 9. And what about the last 34? The last 34, the red arrows that are going up, no one has done any work on. So how is it they're using them?
That's right.
They didn't look to any research. They had nothing to source what they were saying. They had nothing to back up what they were saying. They needed these verses, so they went to this manuscript to get this verse. They went to this fragment to get that verse. They went to this fragment to get these other verses, and they put it all together. They needed these 63 to get 96% of the Quran. They didn't think anybody was going to check them up. They didn't think any of us were actually going to do our own homework. What that means, if you look at it, none of these are really valid. Not one of these are really valid. Because they're either tentative, or they are much later, or no one's done any work on them. So, since all of them are either later or tentatively dated or have no supporting evidence, let's continue in what we say. What we're noticing is there is no complete Quran even within the first century.
That's right.
If they can only come up with 63 fragments to make 96% of the Quran, that's a huge admission right there. And that was brilliant. I love that he did this, because now we can show them. And every time Muslims, I'm talking to you Muslims, every time you start to say that you have 96% of the Quran, I'm going to hammer you on that, because you need to tell us what the dates of those manuscripts are. The Muslims have had to collect 63 fragments of the Quran to find even 96% by 719. Yet almost all of them are tentative or have no supporting evidence for early dates. Some of their dates even go into the 9th and 10th centuries. They have not studied anything. And here's what's interesting. They don't even know whether these 63 fragments actually parallel the Hafs text.
That's true. I mean, you still need to do more studies on that.
Not only that, even the Ma'il, and the Ma'il comes after 719. It is later than the early 8th century, but the vast majority of these are all from the 8th century, the ones that we do know. So, how in the world can they make the claim, and what is missing from all this? I want to know where Uthman's Quran is. Remember why I said this at the very beginning?
Right.
Where is our Uthmanic text? Where are those 5 manuscripts that we looked at the very beginning? 63 fragments do not make a Quran.